For the beadhead nymph, we're going to be using a Daiichi 1710 size 14, some 0.015 lead-free wire, some small copper wire, some pheasant tail, and some peacock herl. For the bead, we'll be using a copper 3.3 millimeter tungsten bead, which is 7/64 of an inch. For the bead, if you'll notice, there is a small hole and a big hole. Make sure that the small hole goes on first. So let's flip this over. There we go. So now I can reorient this in the vise. The way I like to do lead is I take my hackle pliers and just catch the very end of the wire, and then I start it on here. And I'm going to make about 4 or 5 wraps. That's probably enough. And I can break it off. Finish it up in there. And then I'll take Zap-A-Gap, which is just a super glue. And I'll put just a touch right here at the end. And then squeeze the lead up into the bead. That will hold the lead up inside the bead and then hold the bead tight to the eye of the hook. And then come back and just helicopter off the rest of this lead. I can start my 8/0 black thread right back here behind the lead. Snip off this excess. And now I want to tie in my wire, my copper wire. You hold it down here at an angle. And I want to build, what I want to do now is I want to build a slightly tapered underbody. And I'll do that as I wrap the wire back. So I'll go back a little bit. I'll come back up here to where I started. I'll go back a little bit farther. And then back up again. And then finally all the way back. So now you can notice that there's a slight taper built with the thread on the hook. Gives that body a little bit of a more natural look. So we'll take some fibers, pick about 5 or 6, and we want to make sure that the ends are lined up. So we hold them out here, hold them tight. We can cut these. You can strip them or cut them, your preference. Just make sure that they're lined up. And then I like mine to be just a little bit shorter than the overall shank length. So I will transfer that back. I'm going to make a couple 3 wraps right on top of one another. And then move my thread out of the way. And then I will wrap this, and I'll hold it with my left finger after each wrap to keep it tight to the hook. Tight touching turns all the way up, actually overlapping turns. Alright, we get up here to where we ended the lead. Tie this in. Cut off this excess. And now we'll counter wrap this wire for the rib. I want to get 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 wraps out of it. That's 3. This makes 4. Willingness on the 5th. So because this is counter wrapped, I want to go over the top of the wire, and I reverse my thread this way. I tie my wire in, then I go underneath the wire, and now my thread is going the proper way again. And that's the best way to tie in a counter rib. And I can support the hook with my bobbin, and then helicopter off this wire. Alright, now I've got my thread about where my thorax is going to start, which is just about 2/3 of the way from the rear to the front. So now we'll take another group of pheasant tail fibers, and again we want them to be all lined up on the end. This time we want closer to 10 to 12 fibers. So let's make sure they're lined up on the ends. I'll hold them here and then cut them off. So I've got them all even, and then I want to swap them in my hand so that the tips are facing over the eye. So these are going to be the legs. We want to make sure that we get and put it in the right place. So I'll move my thread up here, not against the bead, but about 2 thread widths behind it. If you can kind of see that, it's about 2 thread widths. And I'm just going to make a couple of loose wraps and then check my length. I want these to go just about to the hook point. Those are a little long, so I can pull back just a little bit. Those will look a little better once I get everything else in. I want to make sure that I split them evenly so that I have about the same number of fibers on each side of the hook. So if I do that now, I'll take some and move them over this way, some move them over this way. This will just make it a little easier for me. So now we can take our thread back to about that 1/3, 2/3 point. Now I have my Peacock herl. Got 2 strands here. I'm going to kind of clip those even. Tie them in here. And I wind them forward. And notice where I've left the thread back towards we're at the tie-in point. So as I wrap these forward, I'm wrapping against the thread, and that helps keep them together. They don't get away from you, and they want to separate while you wrap them. So I just come forward, and I'm going to just build up a little bit of bulk here by crossing over. Oop. And I'll tie this in. And cut these off. Now what we want to do is take these legs, pull them back, and you see I've got them. I was able to split them. So there, you can see under my thumb, I've got about an equal number on each side. So I'll hold them with my thumb as I pull these back fibers forward, and then pull these back again. So now I've got the wing case splitting the legs, and the legs are pulled back. Now I can wrap this in. 3-4 good wraps. I'll make a wrap or 2 in front. That stands it up to make it easier to cut off. Alright, situate my legs, and then since it's a bead head, I don't really need to build a head, but I also don't want to build such a wide collar that it distracts from the proportions of the fly. So I just want to try to keep everything, all the wraps right on top of one another against the back of the bead. So that's secure enough. Now we can whip finish. Again, trying to whip finish everything right on top of one another. And I find, you see the angle I have here, right on that? If I'm actually running it against the back of the bead, which forces it to sink down right on top of each other. And there we go. So I have my legs. I'll put a drop of head cement on here. And then I'll soak down inside that thread. And that's my bead head pheasant tail.